Good evening. Many danced their way into so-called Freedom Day. After 16 months, clubs opened and celebrated the easing of most restrictions. But the hangover might yet be to come. The Prime Minister just announced new rules from his country residents where he is self-isolating. From the end of September, anyone going to a club must show proof they've had both their jabs. How will businesses deal with that, in addition to the staff shortages now from so many people being pinged? Our political correspondent Simon Harris has this first report on the clubs, commuters and clashes.
5, 4, 3, 2, 1.
On the stroke of 12, London's nightclub drought came to a noisy end. At Heaven in Charing Cross, 16 months of pent-up frustration exploded on the dance floor. But the club's owner was nervous.
My business may survive now, but on the other hand, I do feel like, am I putting people at risk? I don't feel 100% comfortable with it. I don't feel comfortable being in this environment. As soon as everyone started dancing, I'll say, I came off the stage because I didn't want to be around people.
And less than 18 hours later, there was another bump along the government's roadmap. Boris Johnson, self-isolating at Chequers, put nightclubs on notice.
By the end of September, when all over 18s will have had their chance to be double jabbed, we're planning to make full vaccination the condition of entry to nightclubs and other venues where large crowds gather. Proof of a negative test will no longer be enough.
There was little evidence of any big increase on the number of people coming back to work. For commuters, wearing a mask, unless they're exempt, now depends on whose train it is. On some services it's compulsory, but on others it's merely advised.
It's very confusing because you're getting told one thing, then someone's doing another thing.
We had our shots anyway, but I still want to, protect my family.
I forgot mine this morning. I meant to wear it, so I would still wear it. But I do think it's a bit silly.
This was the Central Line. Before coronavirus, these trains would have been packed.
During this morning's rush hour, control room staff looking at TV screens were able to build up a picture of how many commuters were wearing a mask. Transport for London estimates around 80% of passengers did obey the instruction.
Those who don't might be approached by one of TfL's 400 enforcement officers.
We actually try to speak to them and ask them, speak to them and appeal to their nature and understand obviously that it's for everyone's safety and protection. Otherwise, if they refuse, they can be issued with a fixed penalty notice.
The Mayor wants more people to start using the tube for the sake of London's economy, not to mention TfL's shattered finances. And he wants ministers to bring forward the date when anyone double jabbed doesn't need to self-isolate.
What the government's given with one hand, they're taking away with the other. So look, what I say to the government is, look, the evidence is there that 2 jabs weakens the link between catching the virus and serious consequences. You've already announced you're going to do it on 6th of August. Why not look into bringing it forward?
As if to underscore the problem, there was serious disruption on the Metropolitan line because so many pinged drivers were self-isolating. July the 19th might have been christened Freedom Day, but for some it didn't go far enough. Anti-lockdown protesters clashed with police in Parliament Square. 11 people were arrested. Simon Harris, ITV News.
There's been mixed messaging from the government today on how businesses should handle the staff shortages being caused by the rocketing numbers of workers who are self-isolating. The Minister of London today told worried companies that isolation is not always mandatory if the advice comes from the NHS app. But since then, Downing Street has released a statement saying it's crucial to isolate if notified by the app. Here's our political correspondent, Simon Harris.
Hairdressers like Donna couldn't wait for the end of social distancing. For 15 months, her business in Amersham has either been shut or operating at below capacity. Freedom Day should have meant a salon full of clients. The reality was very different.
We had 5 clients all call up and have to cancel their appointments last minute because they'd been pinged throughout the weekend, which obviously you're not going to fill those slots that quickly, and that's money lost.
Half a mile away, the Beach House is one of Amersham's busiest pubs. Not today. Overnight, some of the staff were pinged and the owner was left with no choice but to shut up shop.
It's very, very hard to take after kind of trauma of the last 18 months. We really thought that now would be thorough to be able to trade normally and start to rebuild the damage caused to our balance sheet by the pandemic.
On top of the disruption to businesses, the government managed to add confusion today when a minister suggested being pinged by the app didn't automatically mean self-isolation.
You have to isolate if you are contacted by the NHS contact tracers or if you're claiming isolation payments. Not everybody has the app for starters, and so it's always been there to give you make an informed decision.
But within minutes, Number 10 said it is crucial people isolate when they are told to do so, either by NHS Test and Trace or by the NHS COVID app. Businesses should be supporting employees to isolate. They should not be encouraging them to break isolation. The chaotic messaging added insult to injury.
The reality for small businesses is that yesterday, whilst it was defined as Freedom Day, many small businesses are in a bit of a predicament because they can't get the customers in, they can't get staff in, they can't get the goods into the business, and this has damaging implications on their ability to function.
The boss of the pub chain thinks there's an obvious solution for firms like his.
Test everybody every day. If they don't have COVID, let them go to work.
That from a man who estimates his business has lost more than £250,000 in the past 2 weeks because of pinging. Simon Harris, ITV News, Amersham.
Good evening. A total farce. The words used today to describe the conclusion of an inquest into the Croydon tram crash. Families say they are furious after waiting nearly 5 years for answers, but instead they believe the truth has been suffocated. The driver of the tram did not appear before the jury, and neither did transport bosses. 7 people died when the tram derailed in 2016. It was going at almost 4 times the speed limit. Today, the inquest found the passengers died as a result of an accident. Our political correspondent Simon Harris has the details.
For Karina and her family, grief is as raw today as it was almost 5 years ago.
I have a 3-year-old daughter that will never meet her grandfather because of this accident. And it's left a hole in our hearts. He was a big part of our family. And our family's never been the same since.
Karina's dad, Philip Siri, was one of 7 passengers killed in the Croydon tram crash in November 2016. The tram lurched onto its side on a sharp curve and slid along the ground, throwing the victims out through shattered windows. 51 people were injured.
When the tram hit the left-hand bend just before Sandilands station, it was travelling at around 4 times the speed limit. Crash investigators think the driver may have briefly fallen asleep. Prosecutors said there was not enough evidence to charge him with any criminal offence.
Today, an inquest jury decided the tragedy was an accident after rejecting an alternative verdict of unlawful killing. There was criticism of the tram company TOL for discouraging drivers from reporting health and safety concerns and for failing to identify the risk of a tram overturning at Sandilands. But the families of those who died were furious, not least because managers from TOL, from Transport for London and the driver Alfred Doris weren't called to give evidence.
We all feel massively disappointed with today's decision, but are bewildered that the jury were prevented from hearing important evidence from the drivers and management at TfL and TOL, hidden behind investigators. The driver was given a sick note.
He should be held accountable, as well as TfL and as well as TOL. And I just feel that today, just by saying accident, it's pretty much wiped the slate clean for him, and yet we're still left with his mess.
Even if you didn't mean to do those things, you apologise, you do the decent thing, and he hasn't done that. He hasn't even apologised to us families.
The driver is the only person that knows why my dad isn't here.
Transport for London says the crash led to improved safety measures, including automatic braking if a tram goes too fast, and a device which can detect a driver nodding off and sound an alarm. The families of the victims have demanded a new inquest.
Well, on that point, Simon, what options do the families have then?
Well, after waiting this long, Francis, they're not willing to give up, so they're about to embark on a new legal process. First of all, they're going to ask the Attorney-General to grant that new inquest. To back it up, they're also going to see if they can take legal action against Sarah Ormond-Walsh, who's the senior South London coroner who presided over the 9-week hearing. In particular, they want to challenge her refusal to call witnesses from Transport for London, from the tram operator and other tram drivers. But getting an inquest verdict overturned is incredibly unusual.
OK, Simon, thank you.